Hello friends. In the previous class, we have discussed about the pre-Malthusian theory. Today, we'll be studying about the contribution of Malthus towards social demography. Malthus has written an essay on population, which was further examined the role of population as the principal cause for poverty. The basic propositions he tried to attempt he tried to prove are: the first one is population is necessarily limited by the means of subsistence, whereas population increases when the means of subsistence increases unless prevented by some powerful checks, and these checks which repress the reproducing power of population, keeping it on a level with the means of subsistence, are moral resistance, vice, and misery. According to Malthus, he explained that the natural increase of population, if left unchecked, um, would try to um, in- 1 minute, guys. Okay. Um, he said that the population tends to double itself every 2.5 decades as it increases in the geographical ratio. Like for every 2.5 decades, it increases from 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32, and so on. It goes on the geographical ratio. That means every 2.5 decades. 1 minute, guys. Extremely sorry. Okay. Every 2.5 decades, my dear friends, the population is going to increase in the geometrical ratio. That means if the population is 1, after 2.5 decades, it becomes 2, and after 2.5 decades, it becomes 4. Like it goes on increasing. Whereas when we talk about the agriculture production, under most favorable conditions, the agriculture production increases in the arithmetic ratio for every 2.5 decades. Like, for example, now if the production is 100 kgs, after 2.5 decades, it becomes double. Then after again 2.5 decades, it is not going to become double, but it goes in the arithmetic ratio like 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. If we see after some, like for example, after 7.5 decades, if the size of population is 4, even the agriculture production will be 4. That means there is a balance between agriculture production as well as the size of population. But if you're going to see 5 more decades, like, then at the time the size of agriculture production will be 6, that of the population will be almost 16. And there is a huge gap as the years pass on, my dear friends. So there will be a huge difference between the production as well as the size of population, which may lead to imbalances in the society. Because there will be a huge demand for food, that means some of the people will be forced to die out of malnutrition or undernutrition, my dear friends. So Malthus has concluded that in 2 centuries, the proportion of the population to the means of subsistence would be 256 to that of the agriculture production to be 9. So he assumed that the law of diminishing returns from the land would operate to slow down the increase in agriculture produce or the means of subsistence. So Malthus has classified that there should be certain checks in order to keep the population growth to the level of subsistence under two heads. One is preventive check and the other one is positive checks, my dear friends. Let us discuss about preventive checks. These are the voluntary checks which each and every individual has to exercise out of his reasoning abilities as he can foresee the consequences of disproportionate population growth, my dear friends. He has to adopt moral restraints in the form of late marriage, prevention of birth of children, extramarital sexual relations, or prostitution, and so on. That means the people have to maintain celibacy, or they have to go for late marriages, or else if we see in the olden days people used to give birth to more children. Right now our duty is to decrease the size within the family, like the government is also promoting, saying that we need to have one or less than two or less than two children. We have to confine only to two children, not beyond that, as the population of our country is increasing. So late marriages, prevention of birth of children, extramarital sexual relations, all these need to be controlled. So we call these as preventive checks. These are voluntary, taken by the state, by the individual. Sorry. The next one is positive checks. These are assumed to be the various factors which are going to contribute to a shortening of the normal duration of life. For example, we have epidemics, we have war, famine, and all other forms of misery are going to be the factors which are going to keep the check of population growth. For example, almost 3 years back, we have seen the entire world suffering with corona. And you must have seen a lot of people have fallen to this epidemic and they have been put to death, my dear friends. So wars, even you can see that in Syria for the past 8 years, the war is going on between two groups. And you must have seen that more than 5 lakh people were missing, whether they are alive or they are dead. No one knows, my dear friends, but thousands of people have been vanished off from Syria. And right now, you can also see a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. And you must have seen plenty of people have been displaced, and there are plenty of people who also lost their life, my dear friends. So, epidemics, wars, even famines are also, and all other forms are going to put a positive check on the population size. So, we have two one. One is the preventive one. This is done by the individual, whereas positive checks are not in the hands of the individuals. Sometimes it may be in the hands of the leaders, or even the nature can also control it, my dear friends. So Malthus has asserted that even though some of the checks operate in every country, there is always a tendency for population growth to be higher than the levels of subsistence. He advocated schemes of human welfare which would aim at controlling the growth of population with a view to make life happy, comfortable, mitigating the hardships faced by the people. So it is the duty of the government to design certain policies, motivate the people to have a decent population, which in relation with the food production in that particular place. He also pleaded that the state should adopt several positive steps like extension of national education in order to make the masses rely upon the necessity of keeping the size of their families within limits which they could support. He also said that the greatest concern about poverty, which is an inevitable effect of overpopulation. He said that poverty is not because of lack of resources, but it is just because of overpopulation, because the population is huge and the food production is limited, my dear friends. He suggested measures when the population is very huge. He also suggested measures like emigration, emigration, emigration. That means motivating the people to migrate to the other countries nearby, to the other places, or to the other countries, my dear friends. So this is going to reduce the burden on the mother country. At the same time, he also suggested that we need to take various steps so that we can increase the fruit production. If we see in India, we have brought this green revolution. We started using high yielding seeds, hybrid seeds, nothing but, so that the agriculture production will increase, so that the food will be available to each and every section of people across the country. So our duty first, if the population is huge, encourage the people to migrate. At the same time, we have to take various steps so that we can increase the food production. So we also have to increase the degree of specialization in terms of agriculture by using high yielding seeds, by employing technology into agriculture so that the production can yield like anything or increase like anything. So he has talked about both positive checks as well as preventive checks. Now, let us discuss the criticism of this theory. The first one is, there is nothing original in the writing of Malthus because there are writers like Hung Liang Chi, Botero, who have already proposed the man's capacity to reproduce was unlimited, and whereas the capacity of producing means of subsistence was limited. That means the size of land is stable, my dear friends, and the agriculture production is limited, whereas the human production is very huge and unlimited. It depends on the capacity of one's individual. So Malthus only presented these ideas in a more forcible manner. The assertion that food production could not keep up with population growth was strongly criticized. Because using the new technology, using high yielding seeds, we can also increase the production, food production, which can also be sufficient for the people, my dear friends. So they have also criticized on this. And the third one is that the moral resistance was the only acceptable preventive check. Critics viewed that Malthus could not visualize that advancement in the field of medicine and change in the attitude of human beings towards contraception uh, will also help in putting on a check, my dear friends. It was only moral, but in the modern societies, you can see a lot of contraceptions coming up. People are adopting that, and you can see that the human production is coming down, or the population is coming down, my dear friends. Malthus concluded that poverty was inevitable result of population growth. This is, however, questioned by those who felt that Malthus was unable to see the social world accurately. Um, for example, um, there are certain societies with more sophisticated technologies where they have larger population which can maintain with higher standards of living. It's not only the primary sector, but even the tertiary and the secondary sector can also provide employment for the people. So if you are going to generate the employment opportunities, my dear friends, it can also improve the standard of living. That was the view of few people on that ground also. They have criticized this theory. Karl Marx also rejected the theory of population because there was no universal law of population, that the source of overpopulation was not merely man's biological power of reproduction, but the prevailing capitalistic mode of production compelled man to produce more for reasons like existence of continuation of the capitalistic form of economic organization, because people require more money, for that they require more production, for which they require more human resource. That was one of the factors which led to the growth of population, my dear friends. On these five conditions or five ways, the theory has been criticized, my dear friends. Okay, now let us go for the other theory, that is demographic transition theory. This theory has dominated recent demographic thinking. It began as only a description of the demographic changes that had taken place over a period of time in the advanced countries. The phrase demographic transition refer to the change in fertility and mortality that accompany the shift from agricultural society to that of the industrial society. Let us see the patterns of world population growth. According to Warren S. Thompson, he tried to made an attempt to generalize the demographic experience in Europe in the theoretical framework. He grouped the nations of the world into three main groups according to their level of birth and death rate based on their mortality and birth rate. The first one is Group A countries. The countries like North and Western Europe and the United States of America. And later on in the 19th century, sorry, from the later part of 19th century to 1927, these countries have moved from having very high birth rates to of natural increase to very low rate of natural decrease, my dear friends. That means excess birth rate over death rate later on was brought down. They have very